So these are the new cables that are going on the Triumph Tiger Facebook owners group page. These are referred to sometimes as the Jeff put in Halford cables. Initially when I saw the post I thought that they were cables that you could buy from Halfords. I'd not picked up on that Jeff Halford was a biker who was making these thicker cables to go on various bikes, including the Triumph Tiger. So this short one here, this will go from the live on the battery through to the starter solenoid. The longer one here with the red on, this will then go from the starter solenoid down to the starter motor. And this one that's just got black taping on the ends, this is going to go from the neutral on the battery down to the earth on the top of the engine casing. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to first start by taking the seat off and having a look at the battery and disconnecting the cables. So this is the way the battery is positioned on the bike. It can be slightly different on different models of Tiger and Tiger Sports. I'll just mention this live feed here. This is an additional wire that's going through to the top box. It's a constant live feed to the power source within the top box so that you can charge up mobile devices, etc. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to disconnect now the cables from the battery, making sure I keep them together, tape them together and label them. Firstly, I'm going to move the plastic toolbox tray, toolkit tray, by removing these two bolts here. When I lift the battery out, I just want to make sure I don't lose the two nuts that are in the top sockets there. Just going to get some tape now to put around these wires to make sure that I get them back exactly the same. So that's the earth wire that's going down into the top of the engine casing that I'm going to be replacing. This is the short wire that goes from the live on the battery through to the starter solenoid here at the back. So that's going to need to come off. And then down here we've got the other feed off the starter solenoid, and this is the one that will go down to the actual starter motor. So we're going to remove the starter solenoid now so that we can connect the two new cables. So this is the one that's coming out. See, it's very short, and we're going to replace it by the thicker cable one. It looks like I can get away not actually taking the starter solenoid out totally. I think I can replace the actual cables, leaving it sat in the actual bike. So I've just managed to squeeze on the plastic terminal cover, and then feeding this shortest of the three cables through now onto the starter solenoid, and then going to secure it back in using the bolt. So that's the first one in, 2 to go. So next I'm going to take off this black cable here coming off the starter solenoid that goes down to the starter motor. So this is off the starter solenoid, and this is the earth off the battery. Now they are joint together, and hopefully I'm going to be able to slide them through, but I'm going to have to get down now into the engine down here and see where the other ends of these two cables go. So we're just looking into the bike on the right hand side of the engine here, and this is the starter motor, and this is the bolt and the rubber cover. That's for the end of the lead that comes off the starter solenoid. So that's one located. I'm just going to have to try and find where the earth is mounted now. I've just come over onto the left hand side of the bike, because as I've moved the wires it seems that the earth is attached somewhere on the left hand side of the engine. So the light is not in the best position here, but you should be able to see a silver bolt at the side of a breather hose, and that's where the earth wire from the battery is connected. So I'm going to have to move one or two of the pipes around it to get some space so I can undo that bolt. I'll just go around the other side of the bike, see if you can get a better view of it. So if I just lift this breather hose out of the way, just at the very bottom of that breather hose you should be able to see a silver bolt. So I don't know which side of the bike I'm going to be able to get the best access from. That's the next job. So we're going to remove the wire from the starter motor, which is that one there, and then we'll disconnect this hose, rubber hose, to get access to the earth bolt down there. So far all the bolts that I've removed have been 8mm, but this one on top of the starter motor, this is a 10mm nut, or in old money, 3/8 of an inch. Not a lot of room to work with here, but it is coming off. I'm just dreading how I'm going to get to the earth wire. Obviously I don't want to have to take the tank off. So that's the nut off, and the rubber terminal cover. So using some pinch pliers I'm just going to try and loosen the spring at the bottom of the breather hose so I can pull it off and get a little bit more room to work in. Just going to use a straight edge screwdriver now just to lift the breather pipe off its mounting. There, that's off. Just a minute, move it out of the way. Alright, hopefully we can get some kind of spanner on the top of that now to loosen it. So I've managed to get the spanner on top of the nut from the right hand side of the bike here, and I just want to remove the nut and then just take the top wire off, which is the earth from the battery. That's the bolt out. I'm just making sure the two leads that I wanted to pull out are both free. Alright, so these are the two leads. Seem quite loose. There they are. So these two here are going to be replaced by these chunkier leads. Oops. So I'm going to do this lead first with the red strapped end. This is the one from the starter solenoid. It's also got the 90-degree connector to go on the solenoid, and this is going to go down to the top of the starter motor. Alright, so just going to feed this through. It needs to go underneath all the smaller wires that will go onto the battery. That's just sitting nicely on top of the starter solenoid. That bolt's just going back in. It's snug tight. And then I need to feed this underneath the wiring harness. Down into the engine. It's a shame it's that's just slightly wider than the plastic casing that it needs to go through, so I'm just gonna widen that plastic casing edge a little bit. Right, just see if you can see it feeding through now on the engine. So here I'm just putting the rubber boot back on that protects the cable on the terminal of the starter motor. That's ready to go on. That's the breather hose, by the way, that I just pulled out of the way just to give me some room to get to the earth connector. I'm going to put the earth connector back on now before fastening back up the starter motor lead, just so it gives me a little bit more room to work in. Just going to secure the earth connection back in. So as well as the earthing wire that's coming down here from the negative on the battery, there's also another set of wires on the same bolt that need to go back on. So I've done it finger tight as much as I can, so it's back on with the 10mm socket. That's snug tight, so we need to try and get this breather hose back on now. Right, so the hose is pushed back on, and I'm just going to now put the spring clip back down. So the spring clip's back on. I had difficulties with the pliers. I'd have been better with normal pliers than these pinhead ones, but in the end I just put some gloves on and did it manually by hand, squeezing the spring clip so that I could release it back onto the hose. So just finger power worked better than the pliers in the end. So I'm just going to put the lead now that comes off the starter solenoid onto the starter motor. Just peel back the rubber boot. Put the nut back on. Finger tight it down. Because you're working in a tight space, just a matter of being patient. Just doing little quarter turns at a time. That's okay. Just move the rubber boot over the top of the bolt and the nut. It's nice and watertight. Okay, so time to put the battery back in now, and this plastic holder for the toolkit, and connect everything back up. Well, it took a little bit longer to put everything back together again in reverse order from what you saw earlier, but with the cables being thicker and less pliable, and needing some longer bolts on the battery as well to go through the various wires that I had there connected, it took a little bit longer just to relay everything and get everything secure onto the battery terminals. But it's all back together now, so we're going to turn on and we're going to see how it starts. Not expecting much different because it was good anyway. So here we go. Just let all the lights come on.